Let's talk about the Whales character. Clover Academy Jack the Ripper, I am going to say right off the start, is more of a Whales character, and I'll explain why as we go through this. But even if you are a free-to-play player and you got one copy of him, that doesn't mean he can't be good when used in the right circumstances, okay? You can use him more for utility as a free-to-play player if you got a copy of him, but as a whale, you're going to be able to optimize his damage. So today we're going to talk about what skills you want to upgrade first for him, what skill cards you want to equip to him, what gear you want to put on this Jack, whether or not you should enhance him, what talents you want to run on him, and then of course what teams he is going to fit well on for both PvP and PvE. So let's start by talking about Jack's skills, starting with his passive. So you get this unique passive just for getting him to LR. Grants a 20% increased mobility buff upon taking damage. So what that's going to do is it is going to fill up that little yellow bar beneath your icon when you're in battle a little bit faster, which is nice, meaning he will get more turns more often. That's actually really pretty decent in PvP and PvE, okay? And then for skill 1, it is a single target attack. It is called 3-point slash. It inflicts bleed on an enemy, dealing continuous damage for 2 turns. That is a guaranteed bleed, which is really nice. And then when attacking an enemy who is taking continuous bleed damage, there is a 50% chance to inflict stun status element for 1 turn. Now, that's alright. I would prefer a guaranteed stun, kind of like Red Yami has on his skill 2, but keep in mind, this is a skill 1 stun, so if you are running Jack with another bleed character like Red Yami, then this could work out really well because you have a 50% chance to stun every single turn that Jack comes around, which is pretty dang good. That's solid overall. Now for skill 2, it is called I'll Slice You Up. It is another single target attack and it applies miscalculation to self for 1 time. That is very, very important. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but that is a large part of the reason why I say this character is the Whales unit, okay? Grants an increased penetration level 2 buff for 2 turns, and then grants an increased accuracy level 2 buff for 2 turns, so also just buffing the character up, making him hit harder against enemies, which is pretty good, okay? But miscalculation, what that does is when using a special skill, for each instance of miscalculation, it inflicts an extra attack on a random target. You can stack this miscalculation up to 3 times, okay? And this effect persists up until you use it, which is pretty insane, okay? It doesn't have like a turn limit. And then so if we look at his special skill here, it's called Golden Ratio of Severance. This is where it gets really interesting. Inflicts an extra attack on a random enemy for each instance of miscalculation, dealing damage equal to 80% of attack and magic attack. Now, personally, I don't recommend a split build, even though it says attack and magic attack. I recommend going for attack on him because that is just going to allow you to do the most damage overall when you're using your other skills, okay? And then inflicts a stun status ailment on a designated enemy for 1 turn. That is a guaranteed stun. So this is the utility I was talking about when I'm talking about free-to-play players. Like, to maximize damage, you want to dupe this guy out for the miscalculation, but when it comes to just using Jack for utility, he has a stun on his special that is guaranteed, and then every time his skill 1 comes up, he has a chance, a 50% chance to stun as long as the enemy is bleeding. That is 2 stuns in his kit, which is really, really good. That is insane utility, right? That's good for PvP and PvE. And then continuing on with the special skill, this is really, really like important. When performing an extra attack, attacks after granting 500%, that's massive, increased attack on the number 3 attack. Okay, so that means you have to have 3 extra attacks go after your primary attack. In other words, you have to have 3 stacks of miscalculation, because remember, max stacks of miscalculation is up to 3 times. Okay, so that means if you wanted to get that extra 500% damage with just using skill 2, it is going to take you 3 turns before you can use your special skill and get that extra 500% damage, right? That is kind of rough. So that's where I say that this character is not super great for free-to-play players, because you are going to have to wait 3 turns to maximize his damage on your special skill. Now, if you are a whale, that changes a lot, okay? Because with his unique passive, when you get him to enhancement, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at enhancement over here, actually. You go to Enhancement level 2, you get a stack of miscalculation +1 at the start of battle. Okay, so that instantly puts you at 2 stacks of miscalculation if you use your skill 2 on turn 1. So that means turn 2, you can special and you'll get 2 extra attacks. And then if you fully dupe out this character, grants miscalculation +2 at the start of battle. So now, instead of taking you 3 turns to be able to use your special, it takes you 1 turn to be able to use your special because you get 2 stacks at the start of battle, plus you get 1 from your skill 2. And then on turn 2, you are able to get that extra 500% damage, and that 500% damage will almost guaranteedly one-shot one of the characters. So you are getting basically 3 to 4 attacks in 1 turn, which is insane, right? So this Jack is really, really good. Plus, if you max dupe him, you get an extra 10% crit damage at 4 stars, right? So that's also really good. That's really good crit damage, okay? So ideally, you build him with crit damage as well on his gear. Plus, you max dupe him, and he just does insane numbers. But that's why I'm saying he's the Whales character, okay? If you don't have him fully max duped, it is going to be a lot harder to use him, but he does have good utility with those stuns, so you can definitely use him without having him max duped, okay? Now let's talk about the skill cards that you want to equip to him. So one skill card you could equip to him is this one right here. So when performing an extra attack, you get that extra 500% increased attack. You only get that if you have this skill card. Keep that in mind, okay? So that is very, very important. Additionally, with this skill card, 35% chance to attack after granting a 20% increased damage dealt buff. That is also pretty dang good. Extra damage, 20% extra damage is solid. However, it is only a 35% chance to grant that extra damage, so keep that in mind. That is with the skill card at level 1. As you increase it, you can increase the activation rate though, making it a higher chance to activate, which is nice, okay? Other options for skill cards that you can run on him, especially if you're not going to be max duping him, which, you know, probably a lot of people aren't, especially with the news of what's coming out after Season 3, okay, would be like this one right here with Julius, Pride of the Wizard King. Gain 10 to 25% increased all attack. It's just going to make him hit harder. Always a very good option for attackers. Another option would be Season 1 Asta's skill card. Applies 12 to 24% increased crit damage to yourself. Jack will hit really hard with increased crit damage, so that's a really good option as well. And then Breath of Darkness is another one. This is free to play for everybody. Everybody gets this one. Applies 10 to 20% increased all attack to yourself. So any of those will work on Jack. Those are kind of the ones I recommend if you don't have his skill card. But once again, if you're trying to make the most of damage on this character, you want to max dupe him and you want to run his skill card. If you're just trying to use him for utility, skill cards don't matter as much. You could raise his damage a little bit with those skill cards I showed, but mainly you're going to be using him for the guaranteed stun and the 50% chance to stun, which is really nice on skill 1. Okay, now let's talk about the gear you want to equip on this boy. So what I have right here is an attack set, a crit damage set, and a penetration set. I do recommend a penetration set, ideally a gold set. All right, none of these are gold sets. I do recommend a crit damage set, once again a gold set if you have it, and I do recommend an attack set, once again a gold set if you have it for any of these. None of these are gold sets, but they work for him. And then for the main stat that you're going to go for is attack, because he is an attack type brawler character. You can see I'm adding 19,000 attack to him. That's going to make him hit quite a bit harder. And if you look at all these pieces of gear, every single piece of gear on him is going to be an attack piece of gear. And then for substats, you would aim for like either crit rate, crit damage, or attack. Okay, so you can see this one right here has crit rate and attack, which is nice. This one just has attack, but so on and so forth. And now you can re-roll substats with the reroll substat stones if you got some of them. So keep that in mind if you guys are trying to look for substats for these this character. And then when I talk about gold sets, I do try to explain this every video, because if you're new, it's confusing. You might want to skip ahead if you're not new though, okay? Regular sets and gold sets are pretty much the same. So right here, this is the Diolante's Joy set. And if you look, I have the staff, I have the brooch, I have the hairpin, and I have the armor. Those are the 4 pieces of gear. I only have 2 of them on Jack though, which means I am getting the 2-piece gear set bonus of penetration +5. However, if we go and look at sets here, and we go look at all these, you can see here is the penetration set right here. That's the normal penetration set that I have equipped. Whereas over here, there's another penetration set that has a gold star. That is what we call a gold penetration set. And gold penetration sets are just better because with just 2 pieces equipped, you get penetration +7 as opposed to penetration +5. Okay, so in general, gold sets are always better than regular sets. So if you can, go for gold sets on your characters. Okay, with that said, let's talk about his talents that you want to be equipping on Jack. So there are actually 2 ways you can go for the attack tree. You could go for damage dealt and crit damage. That's my personal favorite. That's probably what I would go for. Or you could go for the grants 2.5% increased crit rate at the start of a wave, stacks up to 5 times. And attack +7%. So you could go for these 2 together, or you could go for the damage dealt and the crit damage together. You could also technically go for the attack +7 and the damage dealt +5. But I think the crit damage and the damage dealt is probably the best way to go on this Jack. And then in terms of defense, you can go for the flat 20%, and you can go for the stacking defense +4 and the crit resist +2. And then on support, you are definitely going to want his swiftness. That way you can get your special up faster to do that nuking damage if you want. Or you could always go for the route of Mage's Blessing if you are a free-to-play player and hope for that 20% chance to get your skill 2 up faster, to get more stacks and miscalculation faster. That way, hopefully, you can use your special faster. Okay, so you could go either route. You could go for Swiftness or Mage's Blessing. That's up to you. But then you definitely want to run the increased damage resist just to give him more survivability. So that's what I would do on his talent trees. Now let's talk about the teams that you could run him on. Okay, I will give you guys at least 1 PvP team and 1 PvE team. So let's start with the PvP team. This is what I would personally like to run in PvP when I do not have Jack max duped, okay? Because he's not going to be doing the most damage. I don't know if I'm going to go back in on the banner personally to try to get him max duped, but I imagine most people are like me and you don't yet have him max duped, okay? So you run him on what I would call a little bit of a troll team, but it's a stun team, and it works pretty well. So you have William, who is faster than most other characters, and you pair him with Mars. You use the combo skill with these 2 to do an AoE stun. You do need to have Mars's combo skill upgraded to get the AoE stun, because otherwise the activation chance isn't very high. So on Mars, it's really important to upgrade all his skills that do stuns if you want to maximize this team's effect. Okay, but you have an AoE stun with these 2. Then you have a stun with Julius, who is also very fast. And then the enemy team ideally will go, because Jack isn't all that fast. If you look at his speed stat, he's okay, but he's not like crazy. He has 104 speed, right? So the enemy team will probably go after you've done your initial stuns. And then let's say the enemy Noel becomes unstunned because your Julius didn't kill. Well, then you can restun immediately with Jack. All right, so it's really, really nice having all of these characters have stuns, which is really, really interesting. And then it just gets better if you do have Jack duped, because then you are going to be able to potentially one-shot an enemy in addition to maybe stunning them. Okay, so, you know, just more damage the more dupes you have in Jack. That's ideal, right? And then for a PvE option team, this is something I might run in like Hall of Illusions. Stage 80 is really annoying in particular. I know a lot of people have gotten up to that and got kind of roadblocked, myself included. And so what you do here is you have William for a stun, you have Yami for the bleeds and stun as well. You have Noel for the barriers, so you don't get stunned on like stage 80 of the Hall of Illusions. And then you also have Jack here, who can benefit from Yami's bleed. And when Yami bleeds, Jack can stun, right? And it works out pretty well. Additionally, you could actually kind of run this team in PvP too and have it potentially work. Okay, so but this is more of like when I built this team, I think of it more as a PvE team, because you have a stun on William with this primary skill, you have a stun on Yami, you have a stun on Jack, and just a lot of damage between these 3 characters right here in particular, plus the buffs from William. Like, it's a pretty solid team overall. So that's definitely a good option for PvE, but it could once again also be used in PvP. And that is the build guide for Jack. If you guys did enjoy the video, please consider going down there, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.